Hello, my name is Bailey, and today I'm going to be reflecting on the story of Nacirema and then also kind of just talking about different communication techniques and ways that the United States uses, and then also how it's kind of changed throughout history and the effects that it has on our culture. So to begin, just kind of discussing the article, I thought it was really interesting because the first time that I read through the article, I didn't quite understand what was going on. It was really confusing to me. And then I took a second and I reread the article and just saw some different things that I didn't see the first time. The first being that Nacirema, spelled backwards, is actually American. So that was my first hint that he was kind of talking about the American culture and his viewpoints on it. So just looking at it, he was talking about America, obviously, but not talking about it in the nicest way. He was making comments and saying different things that the American culture does that to him are weird or not like his culture. But to kind of go back on that, we as Americans think that our culture is completely normal, that we do what we do because that's what we're used to. But when we look at it, we look at other cultures and we're like, oh, well, what they do is weird. But don't take a second to look at ours as well and what other people might think of us. So, kind of taking a look deeper into our American culture and the way that we communicate with others, I looked at so many of them, and one of the ones that really stood out to me, and that honestly came to my mind first, was social media and the way that we use it to primarily communicate with people all over the world. Not only does the American culture use this, but people from every country has some way to use social media. And this, now we know it as being TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, those kinds of things. And social media is so big and so vast that there are so many people that I talk to that are like, oh yeah, I use whatever, or instead of asking, hey, like, can I get your number to communicate with you, they'll be like, oh, can I get this platform or that platform's information, and they'll communicate that way. And now that's just primarily the way that we communicate. I haven't known any different. I know that growing up my parents knew different. They knew communicating over the phone and texting instead of, or meeting them in person even, rather than being like, hey, sending a picture or posting it on social media for other people to see what you're doing in your life. And it's grown. Some of the platforms that my parents grew up with were ones like MySpace and things like that, and they didn't know any different. And then social media has kind of taken off in the last, I want to say 20 years, just in the way people talk and communicate. Lastly, I want to just talk about the detrimental effects, but also the benefits of communicating through social media. So it depends on who we talk to, but a lot of people either say, yes, it is detrimental to communication, to what people do, but then you'll also see the people who say that it's beneficial. In a study that was done, and this is a article from a scholarly source called Explore. The article is called "The Impact of Social Media on Socialization of University Students," and this was done a few years ago. And it says people are engaging themselves to social media for communication purposes to find social media easier rather than face-to-face communication. A lot of people can say that is detrimental. People don't want to communicate with one another in person anymore, and they would prefer to use an application on a phone to communicate. But then at the same time, people don't find that hard because it's an easier way to communicate with people. Like, they can just be like, hey, this is what I'm doing, you know what I mean? Like, this is what I'm putting on my page, and you can see it. I don't have to go and tell you. For me, it's hard because that's all I've known. All I've known is the world of social media. All I've known is how to use it and use it to communicate with other people, and that's all I've used to communicate with other people other than face-to-face. I don't text people very often. I don't call people very often unless I need to. And I use social media as a huge communication tool in my life, but that's definitely something that us as Americans have become adapted to, and it's definitely changed over the last several years.